All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today we are going to take a little trip back in time. I'm talking way back to the early days of JavaScript to really get to know the one keyword that, well, started it all, var. So you probably use let in const every single day, right? They're your go-to. But what about this relic? You've definitely seen it lurking in old code bases, or maybe in a tutorial from a few years ago. Heck, it might even pop up in a job interview. So the big question is, why should we even care about how var works anymore? And var really is like a ghost from JavaScript's past. Now look, you're not going to be starting any new projects with it, but you are absolutely going to run into it. And when you do, knowing its secrets is going to be the key to debugging that old script or figuring out what's going on. Okay, so the first thing that trips everyone up about var, it's all about scope. You see, var is, well, it's a bit of a rule breaker. It just completely ignores the block scope rules that you're probably so used to with let and const. And this right here shows you the problem perfectly. Just look at this side by side. On the left, with var, we declare test inside that if block, but then we can still access it outside. It just leaks out. Now, look at the right side with let. This is what you'd expect, right? The variable is trapped inside its block, as it should be. Try to access it, and boom, you get a reference error. That right there is the fundamental difference. So you got to be asking, why does it do that? Well, this quote really hits the nail on the head. It says that var pierces through blocks because way back in the day, JavaScript blocks didn't even have these things called lexical environments. And a lexical environment, that's just a fancy term for that bubble of scope where variables are supposed to live. So var is basically a fossil from a time before those bubbles even existed for things like if statement. Okay, so if you thought the scope thing was weird, get ready. var has another little trick up its sleeve. It's a behavior called hoisting, and it makes it seem like your variable declarations are just magically floating to the top of your code. All right, take a look at this snippet. We're trying to alert a variable before we've even declared and assigned it. Now, everything you know about programming says that this should just break, right? It should throw a big fat error. But think again, because weirdly enough, it doesn't crash. So what in the world is going on here? This is where we get to the magic trick, hoisting. Here's what happens. Before a single line of your code actually runs, the JavaScript engine does a quick scan. It finds all the var declarations, and behind the scenes, it moves them to the very top of their function. They literally get hoisted up. So let's break down exactly how the engine sees this. Step 1. It hoists the declaration. It sees var phrase and says, okay, I'll just create this variable at the top for you. So the variable exists, but it has no value yet. It's undefined. Then, step 2. Your code runs. The alert phrase line executes, and what does it show? Undefined. Finally, step 3. The engine gets to the line where you actually assign the value. Phrase equals hello. And here is the absolute most important thing to remember. Declarations get hoisted, but the assignments stay right where they are. That's the whole secret. Okay, so with all these weird quirks, leaky scope, hoisting, how did developers back in the day keep their code from becoming a total mess? How did they stop variables from just spilling out all over the place? Well, they got clever. They came up with a pretty ingenious hack to basically create their own scope. And that hack is called an IFFE. It stands for Immediately Invoked Function Expression. Yeah, it's a mouthful, I know. But the idea is actually pretty simple. You just create a function and then you run it. You invoke it right away, all in one move. The whole point was just to create this tiny private little bubble, its own scope, so that your var variables could live inside it without polluting the global scope and causing chaos. And this is what that classic IIFE looks like in the wild. See those parentheses wrapped around the entire function? That's the trick. That signals to the JavaScript engine, hey, treat this as an expression, not a standard function declaration. And because it's an expression, you can immediately call it using that final pair of parentheses at the end. It's super clever, for sure. But man, thank goodness for let and const, because we just don't need these kinds of workarounds anymore. So we've talked about scope, we've talked about hoisting, and these old school hacks. Let's bring it all back to the present day. Why does any of this history lesson actually matter to you? Well, the answer is it's actually super practical. First, you're going to need to know var to read and debug legacy code. I'm talking about code that's still running on major systems out there. Second, you'll need it to make sense of older tutorials or code examples you find online, and a lot of them are still really useful. Third, it's a classic interview question. It's a great way for interviewers to test if you really understand JavaScript fundamentals. And honestly, for me, the most important reason is this. When you understand all the problems var caused, you gain a whole new appreciation for why let and const were such a game changer for the language. And this little cheat sheet here just wraps it all up nicely. Let's do a quick rundown. Scope. Var is function scoped. Let and const are block scoped. Simple. Hoisting. Var declarations get lifted up, which can cause those weird undefined situations. Let and const. Nope, not available till you declare them. And redeclaration. You can redeclare a var variable all day long, which can hide some nasty bugs. Try that with let or const, and you'll get an error, which is what you want. The big takeaway here is that let and const weren't just new keywords. They were created specifically to fix these problems and make our code way safer and more predictable. And that's our deep dive into the old var keyword. It's actually a pretty cool window into how much JavaScript has grown up over the years. And it kind of leaves you with a final thought, doesn't it? What other ghosts from JavaScript's past are still out there, quietly shaping the code that you and I are writing every single day?